to the United States, actually out of the country the first time since the invasion, and talking to Congress there. We're hearing now that he is hoping and would like to leave Ukraine again in February, on the 24th of February, to go to the United Nations in New York to speak on the first anniversary of the war, seeing that as also a very important opportunity. But I think Davos is part of that picture, trying to get the message across to almost anybody who will listen. But of course, in Davos, you do have extremely powerful people there.
And this, of course, on the day when the Ukrainian president has just lost his interior minister in a helicopter crash. Where does that leave his government?
Yeah, well, I think it just sort of adds the weight to his message. It just goes to show the situation that his government is in on a day-to-day basis, that people might be subject to such significant risks, that there can be no kind of normality going on as long as this invasion is taking place. So I think this only raises the stakes and makes clearer to his audience just what his government has been going through over the last year.
The Ukrainian demands have been clear and consistent. They're looking for more weapons, heavier weapons, anti-tank batteries as well. And he has achieved some of those aims. But today, the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, there was a hint that maybe he would talk about Germany shifting its position. That didn't come an hour or so ago. I guess the Ukrainians must be quite disappointed with that.
Yeah, so just to put this in context, so there's been a lot of speculation recently about whether Germany might go ahead and say, yes, it will permit the supply of a modern battle tank called the Leopard 2 to Ukraine. Now, Germany's position on this is really important because it's not just about whether Germany might provide this particularly important tank, but Germany's permission is required for any country to provide this tank to Ukraine.
That's a condition of sale, of purchase from Germany. Yeah. If you buy our arms, then we must give the go-ahead for you to sell them on. Yeah.
So Germany is very much in focus because Germany has to say yes for anyone to provide that tank. And we know from the Ukrainians, so that the top Ukrainian commander recently said that in order to have a chance of winning this war, that Ukraine needs 300 modern battle tanks. Yeah. So just a few days ago, the UK announced that it was going to supply Ukraine with a smaller number of its model of tank called the Challenger. But it's this Leopard 2, this model that's German-made, that is used by many, many countries. If that kind of gets unlocked, and that could really provide a lot of tanks to Ukraine. So far, the Germans have not said yes on this, but there's been speculation that approval is coming. And there was even a lot of speculation about whether Olaf Scholz, in his speech to Davos, might say, that's what I'm going to do. He didn't, but he did put a lot of emphasis on the kind of weapons that Germany has been providing so far, and that it's been on quite a trajectory from not providing any weapons at all to Ukraine before the invasion to providing pretty serious weapons now. But later this week, on Friday, at the American military base in Germany called Ramstein, there's going to be a meeting of NATO defense ministers. And there's now a lot of expectation that that might be the place where the announcement finally comes through that Germany says yes. And Olaf Scholz kind of hinted at that a little bit in his speech by saying that in all of its decisions, it really is working not alone, but in kind of coalition with its allies, and implying that, well, if that's your reading of what he said, implying that he would rather make an announcement alongside other countries rather than solo.
And can you explain to us, is that a Scholz thinking, or is that a long-standing German position that we will not do this alone?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been an argument that's come out of the German government a lot recently, but a lot of other countries in the West have been using it as well. I think there are a few different kind of interpretations of what's going on here. essentially, I mean, the provision of weapons to Ukraine has been a long debate, not just in Germany, but in other countries too. I mean, I was correspondent in the United States when Obama was still president, 2014 to 2016. That was the period when Crimea was annexed by the Russians, when they started going into eastern Ukraine, the beginning of this long kind of frozen conflict, which dates back all the way back to there. Barack Obama didn't want to provide offensive weapons to Ukraine. So many countries have been on a kind of journey. What you see now in recent months is that bit by bit, the United States, Germany, other European countries have been kind of raising the level of weapons that they're prepared to provide. So they've gone from pretty small kind of portable rocket launchers, which can be used to fire at planes, all the way up to now light tanks. And the battle tanks that we're talking about now are kind of almost like that's the biggest sort of ground weapon that they could potentially provide. And they've essentially sort of gone bit by bit. And there's an image that some people have been using to talk about this, is it's kind of like a boiling the frog strategy.
Right.
That not in one big fell swoop providing big weapons to Ukraine, that then Vladimir Putin might think, well, OK, I'm going to attack NATO to stop these weapons coming through, but rather being very, very incremental in this process.
OK. Thank you for that. Stay with us, please. That's Richard Walker, our Chief International Editor. We're due to hear this address from the Ukrainian president to the World Economic Forum at Davos. The introduction is just beginning, so let's listen in.
Need no introduction. I think that this might be the definition of such a person, but I think there's another definition that comes to mind. I think that in years to come, when dictionaries are trying to decide how to describe and define the word courage, they might say such a quality as President Zelenskyy of Ukraine demonstrated during the Russian invasion of his country. So without any further ado, the first order of business is we will hear directly from Kyiv, live from the President of Ukraine. I will take 1 second before to just let you all know that we have a very special situation right now, which is the First Lady of Ukraine is in the audience, and she will be watching her husband. Mr. President,
ladies and gentlemen, 10 hours ago, a tragedy happened near Kyiv. The helicopter crash claimed lives of the Minister of the Internal Affairs of Ukraine, his colleagues, and helicopter crew when it fell near a kindergarten. 14 of Ukrainian families lost their loved ones today, and many more families are losing daily because of the war. And I shall ask you to honor the memory of every person Ukraine has lost with a minute of silence, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for this minute. Only 1 minute, but it keeps the memory about so many people. Ukraine lives thousands of such minutes, including 3 minutes on January 14th. 3 minutes. The time it took for a Russian missile to travel hundreds of kilometers, hit a residential block in Dnipro and kill at least 45 people. 45 adults, children, 45. My address will be short about the time we are short of, about small minutes, about years made of these minutes. 3 years ago, I spoke at Davos for the first time in person. The topic was how to build a cohesive and sustainable world. I'm talking online now. And the topic is how to cooperate in a divided, fragmented world. Conclusions, they are obvious. The world cannot keep the pace with changes and challenges. The list of crises, global security, environmental, food security, energy ones, needs to be amended with another one, the time crisis. The list of calls for decisive, efficient joint actions needs to be expanded with one more, the call for speed, the speed of decisions making, reaction of the civilized world. Tragedies are outpacing life. The tyranny is outpacing the democracy. Russia needed less than 1 second to start the war. The world needed days to react with first sanctions. The time the free world uses to think is used by the terrorist state to kill. Ukraine and its allies have been resisting it for almost a year. This period proved all our prompt actions brought positive results. The opening of European borders for Ukrainians, the grain deal, the energy unity. Together they saved millions of lives. And not only in Ukraine. It is not only Ukraine, but the whole world needs exactly this pace of decisions and actions. The world was hesitant in 2014 when Russia, without hesitation, occupied the Crimea. The world was hesitant in 2022 when Russia, without hesitation, made the war full scale. The world must not hesitate today and ever. When the evil seeks revenge, the world needs resolve and speed. Russia is exporting terror. Russia is spreading the strain of the war across the world. Ukraine offers the world a peace formula. Please, 10 steps that the world must make faster than Russia makes its new moves. Mobilization of the world must outpace a next military mobilization of our joint enemy. Discipline of Ukraine with air defense systems must outpace Russia's next missile attacks. The supplies of Western tanks must outpace another invasion of Russian tanks. The restoration of security and peace in Ukraine must outpace Russia's attacks on security and peace in other countries. A tribunal for military crimes must prevent new ones. The expansion of NATO and the EU must outgo the spread of the Russian aggression. We routinely defend values which some of the allies take for granted as a fact of life. For us, the fact of life is the world in need of resolute and prompt steps. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago was my first time at the WEF. It was the time when the world was fighting COVID-19. It fought and won. Now the world is fighting against Putin. In 3 years, we will be discussing new challenges and threats in Davos. What will this mean? It will mean we will definitely overcome the current threat. The history repeats itself. At first, the world either fails to notice or underestimates a threat. Then it unites to resist it, and then the world wins. Every time, the same outcome. The world overcame Nazism, the apartheid, pandemics, the indifference to climate changes, financial crisis, and the Kremlin strain. The world will overcome again. This is how much can be said in a matter of minutes. This is how much can be understood in a matter of minutes. The world will overcome again. The time is high to make it happen faster. Slava Ukraini!
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressing the World Economic Forum in Davos. We'll see if he takes questions.
Mr. President, thank you so much for that moving address. Let me ask you a few questions.
Okay, watching that speech with me here was our chief international editor, Richard Walker. Welcome, Richard. The Ukrainian president there telling the world to get a move on, essentially. Make your decisions, make them faster.
Yeah, I mean, again, showing what a brilliant communicator he is, creating a theme that the world needs to speed up in its support for Ukraine, saying that tyranny is outpacing democracy, and making it in an extremely short speech. That in itself, just adding to this sense of urgency of the situation that Ukraine faces. And I think, making an address like that to a place like Davos, which is there for discussion, reflection and consideration and debate, and saying, well, we don't really have the luxury of the time for that, I think was a very effective kind of approach to getting this message across. And the fact, what we were just discussing earlier about Western countries and their provision of weapons to Ukraine, and how it's taken the last year or so to get to really heavier and heavier weapons. Him really saying we just can't afford to wait that much longer for you to kind of make those political decisions, because waiting any longer is going to put Ukraine at greater and greater risk.
And starting with that minute's silence for all those who lost their lives in today's helicopter crash, and then using that minute to make the same point. We have had more of these minutes that Russia has provided, and we cannot afford to wait. Very effective, setting this sort of theme of time. We've watched so many of his speeches over the last year, to Congress just before Christmas, we were just mentioning there. And it really is quite remarkable to see just how this effective communication that he's come up with. Just bear in mind, this is a guy he was an actor. He wasn't even a professional politician. I'm sure viewers will remember, he even played the president in a TV show. It turns out that these skills of communication that he brings have turned out to be incredibly important to somebody who's proven himself now as a war leader. It's such a remarkable story. Thanks for that, Richard. Richard Walker is our chief international editor. Thank you, giving an analysis of Volodymyr Zelenskyy's speech to the World Economic Forum. Well, addressing the same meeting, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz pledged to continue military support for Ukraine. He's under increasing international pressure to allow for the transfer of German-made Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, a demand the Chancellor did not pick up on in his speech.
Russia has already failed completely in reaching its imperialist goals. Ukraine is defending itself with great success and impressive courage. A broad international alliance led by the G7 is providing the country with financial, economic, humanitarian and military support. Germany alone made available over 12 billion euro last year, and we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as necessary. But in order for the war to end, Russia's aggression must fail. That is why we are continuously supplying Ukraine with large quantities of arms in close consultation with our partners.
Let's go to Davos then and join Ben Fazula from DW Business. Welcome, Ben. So did the German Chancellor deliver?
No, he didn't, Phil. Unfortunately not. There were really high expectations here. There was so much diplomacy going on behind the scenes, just across the road from where I am at Polish House. There were 3 presidents